Income equality between the top income earners and those in the middle class has been growing rapidly over the last 3 decades. For a frame of reference, the top 1% of the population, those making $450,000 or more, in the year 2006, it consisted of 1.4 million tax filers. The gap has grown so wide that some compare the era we live in to the Gilded Age, a period between 1870 and 1900 that was distinguished by the excesses of the rich in our country. In the 1960s and 70s, the top 1% of earners took in 10% of the total income of this country. By 2006, now that's going from the 60s and 70s to 2006, the top 1% of earners took in over 20% of the total income pie. The last time the top had this much of total income was 1928. In addition, the average tax rate for these top earners has fallen to its lowest levels in 18 years. CEOs are making record salaries, irrespective of performance, and these outrageous amounts affect the growing gap directly. In 2006, the average Fortune 250 CEOs was paid over 600 times the average worker. 600 times is a staggering figure. And this past Monday, the Washington Post published its annual survey of executive compensation at large public companies and found that in 2007, the average annual pay of the top 100 highest paid executives was $6.6 million. While those at the top of the income scale are prospering, since the 1990s, income has actually declined for workers at the bottom rung and has actually increased only slightly for middle-class workers. We know that Americans are very tolerant of differences in pay and, in general, choose to focus on opportunity instead. I feel like everybody thinks that they're eventually going to be one of the top 1%. This opportunity and the attitudes toward it is vastly different than in the United States than the attitudes of European workers who actually see fairness in equal outcomes, not in the potential for equal outcomes. But opportunity is slipping away for those in the middle classes in our country as wages remain stagnant and consumer goods such as food and gas have skyrocketed, health care. Many are losing their homes, and as I said, health care is becoming more expensive and less available. This in turn affects the ability of hardworking Americans, and it affects their ability to save for retirement, and it affects their ability to put their kids through college. How important is the middle class anyway? Why do we care? Well, the middle class is the glue that holds this country together. Otherwise, we're just scraping by. This hearing will examine the causes and extent of the gap and how this inequality affects American workers. Nell Minow of the Corporate Library is here to fill us in on the issues of excessive pay. This ever-widening pay disparity is bad for workers, it is bad for their health, and it is bad for their families. And there is even evidence that the rich in this country have a shorter lifespan than the wealthy people who live in countries where the income gap is not as great as ours. This ever-widening gap has broad implications for society as a whole, and if not dealt with, will threaten our democracy.